Hi, in this video, I'm going to share another topic demonstrating the importance of advocating for your child and trusting your intuition as a parent, especially if your child has special needs or medically complex issues. In the last video, I talked about our journey with my daughter's vision impairment, and something that I didn't mention was the fact that we were told to enucleate her eyes, basically to surgically remove both of her eyes so that she could have prosthetic globes put in place that would help support her facial bone growth. Because the way it was painted, the picture that was painted for us was that her eyes are not going to grow, and therefore her face is not going to grow, her bone structures are not going to grow, and there's no point in having her keep her eyeballs if she doesn't have vision, because we were told she was blind. And obviously you could watch that video. I'll link it in the description box. But the long and short of it was that my husband and I thought otherwise. We were seeing, noticing, observing examples where it seemed as though she was able to perceive not only light but highly reflective objects, and I felt like she was making eye contact with me sometimes. And now, fast forward to the present moment, over the past 3.5 years to now, she does have vision in the lower fields and the lower left visual field and closer to midline. And so I just think back to, like, gosh, what if we had listened to what we were told, and what if we didn't make our own observations and draw our own conclusions, especially in the setting of a rare syndrome, a rare disease where our daughter is the only one in the world with her specific constellation of findings. So along those lines, the other major example I want to give is the fact that it was suggested that we have a GTube placed, or a gastrostomy tube placed, for my daughter, which is a feeding tube that is placed in the stomach. So, again, I want to reiterate that I'm not giving any medical advice here. I'm just sharing a story and sharing an example of our personal experience, in hopes that it will make other parents feel supported in their journey, especially if it's a journey caring for a child with special needs. And I want to help other people feel supported in following their intuition and following their gut and advocating for their children. So in this story, my daughter was pretty small, and she wasn't gaining weight. There was a period of time where she was pretty thin, and there were multiple factors involved. She had choanal atresia. She couldn't breathe well. She was getting sick, and she had a low appetite, and then she had COVID, and all these different things were happening. And so she was pretty skinny. We were working with different feeding therapists, and we were trying to figure out, how to help her gain some weight, how to help her eat more. And it was suggested that we consider a gastrostomy tube or G-tube placement to support her nutritionally. And my husband had already found a great nutritional drink for my daughter. It's called Kate Farms, and that's another interesting story. Actually, the creator of Kate Farms, I read about his story, and it's fascinating. But anyway, that's for another video. So we figured out my daughter had certain allergies. She developed a dairy allergy, egg allergy, lactose intolerance, all of these different things, and constipation issues. And so we were tackling one thing at a time, and really starting to get on top of things. But having said that, we wanted to get things in order in case we did end up needing a G-tube. So we got the studies that were needed. We scheduled the appointments that were needed in case we did end up actually truly feeling like we needed to get it. everything would have been in order. We wouldn't be, up with our back against the wall in some sort of emergent situation. So the reason why my husband and I really didn't feel like our daughter met the criteria for a GTube placement was because with her syndrome, Mowat-Wilson syndrome, there is a completely different growth chart for these children. Okay, they are not supposed to be plotted on the same growth chart as every other typical child, every other average American child, the CDC growth chart. That's not their chart. But we were seeing healthcare providers at the time who insisted on using the CDC growth chart. And yes, if you plot her weight on the CDC growth chart, she doesn't land on the chart. She doesn't land on the graph. But if you chart her on the Mowat-Wilson growth chart, if you put her weight on that, she was like 15th percentile. And the reason why is because the Mowat-Wilson syndrome kids are known to be smaller in size and weight. And so anyway, I found that paper, I read it, and I had also already spoken to that lab in Italy who published that paper and communicated to them that this is really valuable information, and thank you for doing the work, and thank you for publishing this, because this has saved my daughter from needing a gastrostomy tube placement. And so we went and met with a pediatric surgeon, the one whom we would have selected to place the G-tube if in fact my daughter needed it. And I showed him the paper and I said, look, she falls on this growth chart. And he said, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. She doesn't need a G-tube. It's the right. When we were explaining how she was being plotted on the wrong graph on the CDC growth chart, he said, yes, it's the right data point, but the wrong graph. So he was basically saying her weight, her size is perfect, great for her. And when you plot that on the correct graph, on the correct plot for her, everything works out. She falls right where she's supposed to fall. And so, for the healthcare providers who told us that they don't follow any other chart besides the CDC, and they're not open to other growth charts, and they're not open to reading the literature about this rare genetic syndrome that not a lot of people know about, I took it upon myself to find different healthcare providers, because I need to find individuals who are of the same mindset as me and my husband, of the same mentality, who are open to learning, open to reading, open to keeping at the forefront of medical knowledge and information and literature for what's available and what's being studied, because I want my daughter to have the best care possible, as does any other parent. Any other parent wants their child to have access to the best care possible. And sometimes that means we have to take that into our own hands and advocate for our child and do the research and read and see what has been published and educate ourselves so that we can determine if the care we're being offered and if the advice we're being given in terms of surgical procedures, medical devices, if all of this is truly indicated, if it's actually going to be beneficial, or if a second opinion should be obtained, and maybe a third, and maybe a fourth, and maybe a fifth, and however many it takes until the advice is sound and until it fits. And so what we learned in our consultation with the pediatric surgeon was that even if we were to have proceeded with a G-tube, there's no guarantee. It's not like my daughter would have gained 10 pounds. It's not like we're going to fatten her up that way, And what happens instead is some children lose their drive to eat. And so for my daughter, eating, she's a very social girl. She loves social interactions. She loves interacting with people. And so for her, eating is a very social experience. And so we didn't want her to lose that that's part of the quality of her life. And so this was also during a point in time where we really started to think about quality of life. And we started to kind of back down on some of her therapies because my husband brought up a really good point. He said, what are we doing here? She's exhausted. She's not sleeping well. She's not eating well. She's tired. Why are we forcing her to do all these 10 different therapies every day? It wasn't 10, but it was like a couple of therapies every day. Maybe she just needs to rest. Maybe she needs to have fun. Maybe she needs to relax a little bit. And so that really opened my eyes because I come from a very type A, very driven, high achieving, overachieving, background. That's my personality. And so I needed to have that balance, that yin and yang. And so, yes, when we thought about her quality of life, eating is a social thing for her. And we didn't want her to lose that. We didn't want her to lose that enjoyment that she gets from interacting when she's eating in the high chair. And yes, it takes a long time to feed her. And when we fed her, it wasn't for nutritional reasons per se. It was for her to practice and to learn chewing and lateralization of the tongue and, all of these steps that are critical to eating. And learning how to progress from liquids, purees to solids and, all the progression of that. And we were relying on the Kate Farms for her nutritional support. So, and we still use it. So we basically had to create our own course of action. We had to create our own plan. And, I'm not saying that GTubes are not important. They're vitally important. They're life-saving and they're life-sustaining. And for the individual who needs it, yes, get a GTube. There's nothing wrong with that. Adults require GTubes sometimes as well. And GTubes are not always permanent. Sometimes they're temporary. So yes, GTubes definitely have a role in our world for sure. But for my child, we did not get a GTube. And at her last pediatrician visit, we were actually told, watch out, make sure she doesn't gain too much weight, because she is doing well now. And we are still working on feeding. She still has a wonderful feeding therapist and she is learning to chew, and she loves chocolate glazed donuts, and she loves cupcakes, and she loves any kind of sweet thing, so, and she loves eating. So even if she's not getting much nutritional value from what she eats, even if some of it spills out of her mouth, like, she's still learning, she's still enjoying, she's still tasting, and it's her quality of life. And thankfully she is still growing from having her nutritional drink, the Kate Farms drink. So anyway, that concludes this video. And in summary, this is another story to encourage you, any other parents out there, to advocate for your child and to trust your intuition and to trust what you're seeing and observing with your child. Thank you.